start? Well, it's up to him to tell me. We're going to get started in about 30 seconds here, so I want to welcome everybody. Just so you know, we are streaming live across the world. My daughter actually just texted me and said, woo-hoo. So that means it's a good day. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for coming, and we'll be right back with you.
Here, we are learning to create a more just and merciful world. We are learning today that to move through strife and turmoil, we need leaders. But not just any leaders. Not angry voices and whistles and gnashed teeth. We need humans. Grounded in mercy, full in spirit, whole, driven to move beyond themselves, to serve, to discover, to be open, and in doing so, to open us all up to the totality of the human experience. That is what we are doing here. That is the generation we are helping to shape. The one that will shape the world, our future, and that you are why the work that we do here is more than humanities. It is human, it is sacred, and we are completely devoted to it. Carlow University, devoted to the future of you.
I think I've watched that 1,000 times and I still get goosebumps. At Carlow University, we are just so proud of everything that we do every single day. And we talk about Carlow University as a brand of education that doesn't exist anywhere else in higher education, but its impact can change the course of our future. We talk all the time of what we're devoted to. We are devoted to making this a more just and merciful world. My name is John Cardone, and I serve as the Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Carlow University, and I want to welcome you to our inaugural Impact Series. Tonight would not have been possible without a lot of people. First, I want to thank Carlow University Social Justice Institute, the Office of Mercy Heritage, and Roning Advertising Agency. Special recognition always goes to my team. They are absolutely amazing. They are few but mighty, and they are doing amazing, amazing work. I want to thank the President's Cabinet. I want to thank Dr. Kathy Humphrey and the entire Carlow community. Carlow University is taking on big issues and making an impact, and we are devoted to carrying on the legacy of those gutsy Sisters of Mercy in the 1800s who chose boldly to walk into the chaos. Today is no different, and we are pleased to have County Executive Sarah Innamorato to join us on this journey, whose appointment is a historic one as the first woman in this role. As you may know, yeah, let's do that. Yeah. I am so glad you're picking up on these subtle cues. As you may know, environmental issues were a focus during her campaign and continue to be. The theme of sustainability for today's panel was inspired by her work in the county and the belief that local actions truly have global impact, and you'll hear a lot about that today. Prior to winning the election for county executive, she served in Pennsylvania House of Representatives, where she introduced dozens of bills, leading the effort to secure environmental protection. Carlow University is absolutely thrilled to have you, and to have you kick off our inaugural Impact Series. So everyone, please welcome the Allegheny County Executive, Sarah Innamorato, to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow. Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Oh, I like that response. It is a Monday night, so we need some energy. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Carlow University, for thinking of me and having me be a part of this wonderful series. And thank you, Dr. Humphrey. You are just effervescent and just an inspiration to our region. So honored to be in your presence. I also say that being county executive, it's a great joy because every day I get to wake up and I get to think about how do we make a more just, equitable, and sustainable world starting right here in our own backyards. And when I look around this room, I know that there are so many others who are dedicated to doing that in your own way and using your own voice and skill sets. So it's going to be a big job, and it's going to take all of us. So I just want to applaud Carlow for convening this event and your commitment to prioritizing resilience in the face of climate change as you consider how to make a more just and merciful world. Like I said, we have so much work to do here, right here in Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, but across the globe. There is a phrase that's been around for decades, right? Think global, act local. It is an interesting lens to think about climate and resiliency, especially the impact of our actions here in the Pittsburgh region. Because on one hand, the Pittsburgh region, we're often touted as a very climate resilient Pittsburgh and across Pennsylvania. Because we know that nearly all of Pennsylvania's 67 counties will have an increase in unhealthy air quality days by the year 2054. And that was in a report that was released today. But we know it's not just about our health. As severe weather increases in frequency and volatility, we're at risk for events that lead to more inland flooding and landslides here in our region. In Allegheny County, we're gonna see 86,000 properties that are gonna be at risk of severely flooding over the next 30 years as climate change worsens. In a recent study from the Center for Climate Integrity predicts that local municipalities in Pennsylvania will need to spend $15.4 billion by 2040 to protect residents from extreme heat and rain events. And that's billion with a B. I'm being kind of a bummer, right? But I think we need to really level set of how big the problem is and how it manifests so locally and impacts our day-to-day lives. Because we really are paying for climate change with our health, our homes, our communities, and our bank accounts. But I believe that we are in our generation's industrial revolution. And this time, in this moment, we can make it green, and we can make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind. We have an opportunity to right the wrongs from the past and build towards a more just and inclusive and sustainable future. I know that Carlow is encouraging everyone to think big and expansively on this topic and what we can do to help each other build a healthier, more inclusive, and resilient world. We can use this moment to expand our thinking and to bring new ideas and energy to these challenges that we see each and every day. I just wanted to step back and share a story with you on something that inspired me to address climate change and think differently about this big topic. So during the lockdown days of COVID, we all had kind of a lot of time on our hands. I was a state representative, and I was thinking about the confluence of housing affordability, aging housing stock in our area, gentrification, energy efficiency in our buildings, and green jobs. And I jotted down a plan that eventually became a piece of legislation called Whole Home Repairs. And the Whole Home Repairs bill, we were able to get it across the finish line in Harrisburg. And in this year, in Governor Shapiro's budget, he actually put more money towards the program. And what that program does is that it gives income-qualified homeowners financial support for critical home repairs so they can stay in their homes. So we raise the quality of housing stock in our region. And at the same time, it makes homes more energy efficient. It supports local jobs. It removes health hazards like lead that harm children when they're in their homes. And it keeps more money circulating in our local economy. So we can think about sustainability and climate change as a way to improve people's quality of life, not just addressing huge challenges. And I think when we think about sustainability and climate change, we can't think about it in a silo. It needs to be woven into all of our work, because in any skill that we take on, any topic that we challenge, there is an opportunity to bring this to the forefront and to weave it into our process. So now, as your county executive, I'm thinking about how we can use resources and departments in our purview to reduce pollution, to be more climate resilient, to create good paying jobs, and build a healthier community for everyone. And this means that we're going to be enforcing regulations on our industrial polluters differently. It means that we're going to build a world-class transit system that runs on electric buses. It means we're going to retrofit our public housing to be more energy efficient and run those buildings on solar. It means we're going to create inclusive economic opportunity for our frontline communities and those who have been left behind. Because right now, we have an unprecedented amount of federal funding available. And we know the urgency of the situation. So many of us are living it each and every day. We know how deeply climate change impacts our lives. And we have the opportunity to make people's lives better. But it's going to take action. It's going to mean we have to be courageous. And most importantly, we're going to have to dream big. And I know we will build a sustainable, equitable, and resilient future together, because the cost of inaction is far too great. And I hope, as we have this wonderful panel of experts across the nation and globally recognized, that you're inspired to get involved, to take action, to dream big, because we have so much work to do to build an Allegheny County and a world for us all. Thank you.
Good evening. Come on now, we do better than that. Good evening. I am so grateful to see all of you here. And I just want to say to our county executive that I am inspired by your words. And I am so grateful that you are our county executive because of the initiatives that you will make happen. You're not just talking, you're going to do, and I'm excited about that. So thank you for being dedicated to creating a cleaner and a more sustainable world in our county. Carlow University eagerly anticipates collaborating with you, Sarah, to discover solutions that will lead to a sustainable world, both locally, globally, which is the very purpose that has brought us all here this evening. I would also like to extend my appreciation to every one of you present. I am thrilled that you are concerned about our world, a world that we may not see the future, but that truly our children will. Thank you for participating tonight, and thank you for being engaged in this first annual Carlow Impact Series. At Carlow University, we strive to create an experience that is not only life-changing, but world-changing. We are focused on creating generations of ethical leaders who not only have the skills to be leaders in the workforce, development, healthcare, education, the arts, business, and service, but that they have empathy and spirit to create positive impacts in their communities and in the industries. It is our greatest hope that our students will leave Carlow with a determination to create a more just and merciful world, to aim for being more than successful, but to strive towards playing a significant role in the betterment of our society, in the betterment of our world. Don't get me wrong, we want our alum to be rich because they can donate back to Carlow. But being significant is much more important to us. The type of global impact we want to make starts with conversations. It starts with bringing different perspectives to the table. We are launching the Carlow University Speaker Series for this very purpose. On this campus, we will take on some of the world's greatest challenges and explore regional approaches towards addressing them. Through these change-making conversations, we can be pebbles that cause a ripple of effect of change in our community and in our state, in our nation, and in our world. These discussions will be rooted in Carlow University's programs and values, connecting the dots between its unique approaches to higher education with global and national issues. What does it mean to create a more just and merciful world? And how does it relate to sustainability, inclusivity, social justice, and other pressing issues? We seek to make these connections, and in doing so, to spark meaningful actions. This is our vision, and we invite all who share it to join us. We have an amazing interdisciplinary panel here today, representing local, regional, national, and global perspectives. And we are honored to have John Fernandez, Director of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Environmental Solutions Initiatives. Well, that's a mouthful, John. He is widely recognized for his work on climate change, having enlisted the capacity of the MIT community in the transition to a net zero carbon, biodiverse, and equitable future. He is a professor in the Department of Architecture at MIT, affiliated with the Department of Urban Studies and Planning, and a practicing architect. John Fernandez founded and directs the MIT Urban Metabolism Group, and he is also a member of the World Economic Forum Global Commission on Biodiverse Cities by 2030. the Urban Climate Change Research Network. John, I hope you can get that done by 2030 because I plan on still being around and I want to see that. And he is also a part of the leadership team of Ocean Vision. Joining John here is Erin Millay, a multidisciplinary artist and assistant professor of art at Penn State, who solo exhibit Permissible Dose investigates visual, auditory, and olfactory experiences of living in proximity to industrial pollution. Susan O'Rourke, one of Carlow University's professors, special education and director of the Center for Global Engagement. Susan's work has given our students the opportunity to be global-minded by creating schools and creating clinics and establishing water wells in impoverished places. And Dr. Jennifer Roth, professor of psychology and counseling here at Carlow University's, whose work involves healthcare programs rooted in social justice. She serves as the vice president of the U.S. Blind Tennis Association. Each of our speakers will give a brief presentation before we begin our panel. So I'd like to start and invite Erin to come to the podium and begin this section of our program. Erin.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much to Carlow University for having me and for the wonderful introduction, Dr. Humphrey and County Executive Sarah Innamorato. My name is Erin Millay. I am a visual artist, and I am based between here in Pittsburgh and State College, where I teach at Penn State. And I will be talking a little bit today about an upcoming exhibition of mine that's going to be here at Carlow University's Art Gallery, and it's opening in April, so I hope you can all come. And I was really excited to hear Sarah Innamorato's introduction, which really dove a lot into air quality in the region. And so the exhibition is called Permissible Dose, and there's a few images that I'll be getting into. It's sort of broken into two components. So there is a short film, and then there's a sculptural installation with custom fragrances that I made in consultation with perfumers, and sort of to explore the reality of living in close proximity to industrial sites. To give some background, which is probably familiar to many people here, but the Pittsburgh metropolitan area and surrounding region is often ranked in like the top 10 of like the worst cities in America for air quality, the county in the top 2 for rates of cancer, and then especially fence line or frontline communities that live really in proximity to the industrial sites, increased risks of asthma, heart disease, and cancer. And historically in the region, there's been, and recently, there's a small number of corporate polluters who are essentially responsible for the majority of the pollution. So the title for the exhibition is Permissible Dose, and that comes actually from cancer therapy and how chemotherapy is given to patients, and essentially it's a term about how much the body can handle, sort of how much radiation the body can handle. And as I was learning more about pollution in the region and the sort of history of environmental regulation, I realized that there's a kind of a parallel here between how pollution is regulated, that there's a harm that's kind of built into the system of a certain amount of harm that people and the environment can take. And that line is often sort of pushed by corporate polluters, or sort of who move very much beyond that line, and often pay fines that don't incentivize a change, though there's a very big recent court case here in Pittsburgh and a lot going on to sort of update regulation and update the fee structure, so there is optimism. But a lot of the communities that live really close, as Sarah Innamorato mentioned, are really treated as an acceptable sacrifice and bear the brunt of the burden. So as I was spending time, I was going to lots of community events, going to meetings, visiting a number of different sites. I started to think a lot about the human body as sort of a sensor and an alarm, kind of to better, as a tool to sense what's going on in the environment. And one of my images you'll see is an app that's called Smell Pittsburgh. It's a very well-known app developed by a number of researchers at Carnegie Mellon. I actually just used it this morning to report there's like lots of smells where I live related to multiple industrial polluters in the region. It was mentioned it was a code red this morning, so I was there on the app reporting some smells. And the exhibition really tries to engage with this idea of the body as a sensor and these kind of chemical entanglements that we live in, often without our consent and often without our knowledge. So I worked with a perfumer, multiple perfumers, to develop a custom scent that mimics hydrogen sulfide, which is a very common pollutant in the region, often described as rotten eggs. So you can see there's a little spritz of an egg perfume I made from overcooked hard-boiled eggs. So come on and check it out. But it is. I hacked a diffuser, and it is tied to some custom electronics and software, and so it spurts the smell depending on the air quality. So it's tied over the internet to a sensor that's nearby one of the facilities in the Mon Valley, and so it will spurt in the space depending on the air quality that day. And then in the background, there's a short film that I made that follows two community members who are trained in an EPA method to regulate visible smoke emissions. So it's an experimental documentary, but trying to give a little bit of a glimpse into their process and the challenges that community members face to both be believed and heard. So I'm really excited to share this work at Carlow. I have shown it in Cleveland, but this is going to be the first time that it's here. So I'm very grateful to the University Art Gallery for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to being in conversation with everybody here. So thank you. And next I would like to welcome Dr. Jennifer Roth to the stage.
All right, thank you so much for that. Thank you all for being here, and especially thank you to all the organizers. I know this took a lot of work, and I appreciate everything you did to make this happen. So yes, I work with what we call blind tennis, or tennis for athletes with low or no vision. And you might be thinking, how is that possible? That's everybody's first question. So on the photo, we have two of our athletes, Maggie and Mo. Maggie is standing on a tactile line so that she knows where she is on the court. And she's an elite multi-sport athlete, as is Mo. They are both Paralympians in other sports. We won't bother to mention the other sports. But anyway, they play with a sound ball, okay? So it's an audible ball that has a rattle inside of it. So these athletes are tracking the ball by sound. On the right, we have another athlete, Chuck, and he's standing playing what's called unity tennis, where people of different abilities and sight classifications will play on court at the same time. He's standing with a woman who's the director, Coach Rinaldi, the director of women's tennis for the United States Tennis Association. And you might be wondering, how does this fit into a sustainability conference? Well, the issues that are facing the environment and healthcare, the sustainability issues, there are a lot of parallels to the sustainability and social justice issues in tennis for athletes with low and no vision, and other athletes as well. So this is a difficult sport to play. It's a difficult sport to learn. And it might surprise you, but there's no money in it. You know, there are no cash prizes. There are no courts in the United States. The sound ball is very difficult to track. That's where the work that I'm doing, as well as my team of students here at Carlow, as well as my work with the Highland Park Tennis Club here in Pittsburgh and the U.S. Blind Tennis Association comes in. So that ball that's tough to track, we did a series of experiments here at Carlow that we've recently published, developing a new sound ball that will, it's easier to track through space. Other issues of sustainability include that there aren't a lot of coaches who are proficient at coaching this sport. So Normally a coach plays a sport. This is a different sport. I mean, it is a form of tennis. It's also sort of a different sport. So we don't have any proficient athlete coaches. So we have a lot of tennis experts coming in and trying to learn how to coach blind tennis. We don't have a lot of facilities or groups in the United States learning this sport. It is played pretty well in about 30 other countries, but not here. And that's where this work comes in, to make the world a more just and merciful place, to be more inclusive of athletes, to provide them the health opportunities, the social opportunities, the socialization opportunities. A lot of people who play this sport are former tennis players who are losing their vision. So imagine for a moment going from a very active, engaged lifestyle to maybe you're a little nervous to leave your house because you can't see or you can barely see. So we're trying to work on all of those things. The group at the United States Blind Tennis Association, centered here in Pittsburgh. Also, my current group of students running a research project this month on collecting data on how to coach better and what sort of strategies might work, because a lot of this is assumption-based and needs to be tested. Other threats to sustainability include few competition opportunities. And so the USBTA is also working on that. So people with low or no visual ability are one of the most discriminated against groups in the United States in terms of employment, education, sport opportunities. It might not surprise you that most sports do not have a low vision or no vision version available. There are transportation issues. Some of our athletes, if they're taking even an access cab at low cost, can be going 6 hours round trip within the city of Pittsburgh, including a layover where they're sitting on a bench in front of a grocery store. So we're working on developing transportation solutions as well. So I'm really excited to be doing this work along with my partners at USBTA and Highland Park Tennis Club and throughout the world to make the world a more just and merciful place for a group experiencing discrimination and fewer opportunities than some of the rest of us. I get to put my Carlow values into action as a Carlow professor, and it's one of the reasons I'm here at Carlow, because I like to walk the walk. And what I do, the work I do, and how I spend a lot of time are aligned to Mercy values, and I get to put that into action here at Carlow. So the good news is that we're a grassroots organization and working very hard. We're tackling all of the threats to sustainability within this sport. So thank you for inviting me here, and I'd like to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Susan O'Rourke, to come up next.
Thanks so much for everybody that's here. I have been at Carlow for 26 years, and I don't ever recall seeing this large of a group for an academic conversation like this. And I really appreciate all of the work that the marketing team did, and for Dr. Humphrey's embrace of really giving us a space to really kind of have these conversations. I've been working in Uganda since 2013. Initially, I was there to train teachers in how to teach children with disabilities and include them in their classrooms. What we quickly learned was that there was a problem with access to clean water. And this is essential to reduce the disability rate. Children were experiencing blindness due to contaminated water. So according to the UN, over 80% of Ugandans do not have access to clean water. And the disability rate is much higher in the country than the rest of the world. Climate change has also negatively impacted this region. They have unpredictable weather, there's extreme weather, and this is causing some famine and drought. Now, pictured up here, you'll see Patricia. She's holding a fully mature ear of corn, or maize as they call them. This picture is from 2017. They experienced drought conditions for 2 years, and everyone in their community was starving. So we were asked to see if we could help And we were able to go in and drill a clean water well in September of 2017. It was amazing to see what the difference was. Every single year when we return, we see that this community has grown and developed just because they had access to a clean water well. They're well organized. They have a dream of having a health clinic and a school. And our students have held several health clinics there. They've established a pharmacy with solar power, and we've provided the children there with disabilities with adaptive equipment, some walkers, so that children that were just crawling and laying on the ground could now stand up and walk. We're helping them to develop a clinic this year, and we hope to visit there in June and have it completed. Now, this is just one example of what access to clean water does. And let me tell you, we've drilled 10 others in Uganda with the similar kinds of results. Now, we've also constructed the first inclusive school in the Teso region, and this is where kids with disabilities can learn alongside of their peers, instead of just being marginalized and hidden in their homes. I have to tell you, we've learned a lot over these 10 years. For instance, we require every community to have a maintenance committee to manage the well, so that they have organized times when the well is available and fees that are paid for the use, so that they can then pay for the repairs that inevitably have to be made. We've also had a community where we've brought in our nursing faculty and our nursing students to provide maternal and child health conferences to help them improve their health outcomes. We want to be sure that every community has ownership of these wells. And so when we build the school, when we build the health clinics, the communities are responsible for making the bricks themselves, and they're responsible for the manual labor that goes into making the building. We also have met with folks who are very concerned about gender-based violence in their communities. And so we worked with the students at Carlow and with 6 schools in the Buketia region and created a curriculum called Watata's Got Talent, which focuses on teaching children about conflict resolutions, the value of staying in school, especially for girls, and healthy relationships and what those look like. But all those things that we've done, it really all begins with water. And so now I'd like to have John Fernandez come up.
Great, thank you so much. Dr. Humphreys, County Executive Inamorato, the organizers, thank you so much for the invitation. My name is John Fernandez. I'm a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I had prepared remarks, but actually I'm going to wing it because actually I want to start the conversation. I'm not going to spend much time up here because I'm dying to get to the conversation. I want to say a few words about what I've heard in the last few minutes. This notion of sustainability being a technical exercise that's challenging, and the goal being decarbonizing, is a very, very limited way of looking at things. In fact, it seems to me that what we've heard in blind tennis, it's a technology and a protocol and a system and education to be able to include people in an activity that many of us would have thought wouldn't really be possible. If we can put a man on the moon, we can make that possible. I mean, there's a shift in the emphasis of technology development today that I see, and we can talk more about it, at so many different levels, that no, technology is not just about making more money. It's not just about increasing productivity. It's actually about these challenges that we have become habituated to. And that's one of the themes I want to bring up. As a species, we're extraordinarily resilient. We adapt. The downside to that is we habituate ourselves to situations that we really shouldn't accept. And there's a really interesting thing for me that's happening in engineering and technology and design and business, which people are asking fundamental questions about that, our level of habituation and our level of accepting situations where, actually, there could be a fix, there could be a way to move forward and to develop what is the actual goal, which is a more humane society. So that's one, I wanted to just say that about, because I think that's really the key for me, which then, one of the ways that I see the production, the cultural production, is that cultural production is one of those things that we do. I'll talk about engineering and science, I will, but cultural production is one of those things that actually is the most powerful thing to shift societal paradigms, to get people to think in a different way. One of the reasons why we have national parks is because a group of painters went out to the West and painted the West and showed to decision makers in the East what an extraordinary endowment the United States has. And that was extremely powerful. Think about literature, think about music. I'll talk about our work with the music industry. Cultural production is really it's maybe the key towards the paradigm shift that we need, that decarbonizing is dependent on. It's not the other way around. And then the other thing that I just want to tie together from what I've heard is there's an enormous emphasis on climate change today. Of course, you can argue, well, we're not doing enough, we're not doing it fast enough. I agree with all of that. But we also have a tendency to sort of be singular in our identification of a problem. It's carbon dioxide. The reality today, and for many decades, has been the more existential issue communities around the world is the lack of potable water. Actually, that's the real crisis. I remember traveling to Amman, Jordan, 25 years ago, and they were already trucking water into the city for people to use. So we have to be able to think more broadly about the resource requirements that fulfill our needs, this generation, in ways that we don't compromise the ability to future generations to fulfill their needs. And of course, that's the definition of sustainable development, right? So and that is, for me, the mission for us as a species at every level and in every sector of society, private sector, public sector, academia, and otherwise. These thoughts were really kind of were the seed. I had the seeds of these thoughts back in August 29, 2005. I was working in New Orleans on the left there before Katrina. And I stayed there for the first part of the hurricane, left, and then 2 weeks later came back. And what struck me is the quick move towards a context that is not just and devoid of mercy. And that's a martial law context, when regular rules of society are suspended because, well, there are more important things. I'm sure many of you have, maybe some of you have experienced that in real time in person. And it's a really extraordinary thing to experience because you realize we as a species, we can do that. We do that sometimes. And then on the right there, so that on the left, that was a personal experience. On the right, it was an experience that I think I can say I shared with all of you, which is 17 years later, a third of Pakistan was flooded. 30 million people were displaced. 15 or 1,800, I'm sorry, I don't remember the people were actually were killed. 400 children. And, we read our ability to habituate ourselves to this kind of disaster does not bode well for the coming consequences of climate change, because I can say for myself, I mean, I work in climate change and the environment, I can say for myself, the day before this happened, I had a kind of life, did my things. The day it happened, I, read all about it. The day after, my life didn't change fundamentally, right? And this is the challenge that we have, is how are we going to respond as climate change accelerates and becomes more severe in ways that are merciful and just, not only locally, but globally, as was said at the beginning of this. And I'll talk more about the urban metabolism group and the research that we're doing, but again, thank you so much for having me, and I think now we are about to have a conversation. Thank you so much.
So we have a lot to cover. As you saw from their presentations, we have quite a diverse group here today, and that was quite intentional. As I mentioned earlier, we take a different approach to higher education at Carlow University, and we believe that these crucial issues, such as sustainability, requires a different way of thinking, and a way of thinking that is unique and innovative. So for us, a more just and merciful world is rooted in a foundation for everything, for everyone, and for the world to be better. We have to begin to pay attention, but more importantly, we've got to do something. Do you agree with me? Yes. We've got to do something. So let me start here, and me start with Dr. Roth, and I'll give you a chance to ask a few questions as well, because I'm just like that. But I want to start with Dr. Roth, because I would suspect that most people didn't make the connection before coming in today and actually hearing how you really are working to create a more just, a more sustainable world through your work, because your work is created a solution to barriers. And oftentimes that's what the sustainability is about. It's the creation of barriers. It's the elimination of barriers so much. So spend a little bit more time and speak to how your work is creating a more merciful environment. And if you can think of some examples you showed us on the screen of how that work is indeed creating a more just world, but also sustainable. And I'm not sure if you mentioned that you created that tennis ball, but I just wanted to say it because I think it's pretty cool.
So I'm in development for the next iteration of the tennis ball that is easier to track. So thank you for that plug. Very good segue. I will buy you a glass of wine later. So the ball is very difficult to track. So the ball, it's like it has a baby rattle inside of it. So imagine it makes a noise whenever it bounces or whenever it hits somebody's racket. But the players quickly develop strategies like putting a lot of spin on the ball so that the BBs inside the rattle become like the water in the water bucket that you can spin, and then it doesn't make any sound. So I have a hard time watching a sport where the players are strategizing the athleticism out of the sport and just trying to annihilate one another. I mean, annihilating other people is super fun in sport, but don't get me wrong, I try to do it all the time. But you want the athleticism to be high. You want the new players to get kind of on the hook and stay with the sport. So I'm a patent holder based on some research that we did with a group of students here at Carlow and published on a new electronic sound ball that uses the principles of cognitive neuroscience, of which I'm an expert in cognitive neuroscience. And I know how the brain localizes sound in space. Okay, so I'm exploiting the physics principles of sound sorry, nerd alert, I can really go down the nerd path. So I'm exploiting what I know about how the brain uses sound to locate an object in space using only sound and created a new sound ball. And it's surprising. I've not been an engineer before. This is new for me, so it is surprising how long this process takes to go from concept to multiple prototypes to production. So we're post-prototype and we're hoping to go to production at some point, but now we're working on the foam housing to make the ball bounce higher, and so now we've opened that can of worms. But all of this is in the name of creating a more sustainable sport. So if you're playing a sport and you don't know where the ball is and you can't figure out where it's going, you might not come back. And now you're in your apartment and you're not leaving the house. You're going back to your old ways. A lot of athletes who become blind, blind is a relative term, by the way. A lot of people who are quote unquote blind do have some vision, but they don't drive. How many times does an athlete say to me, Jen, this might surprise you about us, but we don't drive. So we need to tackle the transportation issue. So, you don't drive, you might go back to being holed up in your apartment. People who become blind often become quite depressed, quite socially isolated. More barriers to sustainability in the sport. I could go on. So we're trying to tackle all of those issues, trying to showcase some of the athletes who've overcome some of these issues so that they do engage with the sport and become less depressed and become more engaged with communities, have a better social life.
Yeah,
things
and
like
so
this.
I think, you're really speaking to that culture and how we are altering the culture about who is and who is not important enough to serve. And I think
Yep.
so oftentimes that's lost. Erin, let me move to you. What drove you to do this? I mean, what drove you to put funk in a bottle and spray it out, right?
Yeah. As an artist, I just kind of tend to make artwork about my immediate surroundings usually. So a lot of my work relates to our kind of cultural, and also sometimes I'm looking at personal or familial relationships to land. I grew up more in the Western United States, and so the industries I was more familiar with were logging, mining, agriculture. And when I moved to Pittsburgh, I came to attend graduate school here. I'm always excited to learn about a place and kind of its history, and I think the landscape of Pittsburgh is really beautiful, and you can really also see the history of extraction and industry in it too. So I would say the journey to the eggs in the bottle was kind of a long time coming in terms of probably when I first kind of moved to Pittsburgh, I was starting to attend community meetings, going to different events, and air quality is really a big conversation in Pittsburgh. For someone, I was from outside of Pittsburgh when I moved here, and there's this idea of it being, quote, post-industrial, but, we know that's not really the case. There's still, there's still a number of operating steel facilities, and there's a lot of questions sort of about their future, but I was also teaching at a Penn State campus in Beaver, which is right by this big Shell petrochemical build-out. So there's also a lot of conversations about this petrochemical future and fracking and kind of what the sort of industrial future of the region is going to be, and billing some of this as a, quote, savior, economic savior of the region. So I think I was kind of tied into all this stuff. And where I live in Pittsburgh is about 15 minutes from Braddock and the Edgar Thomson Mill, and so I occasionally sort of get wafts of smoke and of hydrogen sulfide, but it's of course not the same as living close by. And a few number of years ago, I was in a little research group with a number of artists, and we would visit various sites, and we did a kind of live sound performance where we were recording industrial sounds live, and then another person was mixing them, and then you could listen to them. And I think, I experienced the smells, reading about the health impacts in the area, but I think even just being, we were right up by the fence, and being there for a few hours just headache pretty quickly. And so I think that the space between sort of knowing about something and then very actually like the physical reality sort of on your body from working really close to the sites is what sort of inspired then me to kind of continue down this path and explore how you could share, how you can kind of, as an artist, kind of communicate the sort of those lived experiences and their many kind of layers.
So in general, we know that there are people who are not interested in this topic because it's not real, right? And how do we drive people to a different reality? How do we help people to come to the knowledge of lived experiences? I think your art exhibit is working towards that, but I throw this kind of question up in the air for any of you, is to talk about how do we as a society get people to take issues that are affecting the lives of our fellow humans, how do we get them to take it seriously enough to take some action? Each of you have taken some action. How do we spread that?
Humphrey, that was my question. But I'd like to address it to Dr. Francis because I heard more of that in his speech, changing the mindset, and so I'd like for you to address that.
Well, I mean, and of course, if anyone else. So yeah, I'll start, which is, on the one hand, there's a percentage of the American population that we should just leave to the side. And that sounds like a harsh statement, but for example, on climate denial, on active denial of and pushback on climate actions, there's about 8 to 10% of the American population that's just not going to be convinced, right? It's going to be decades. We're going to be at 4 degrees by the time they say, oh yeah, it's kind of hot out, right? It's not worthwhile. It's really not necessary, and it's not worth anyone's time to be 100% perfect on bringing everyone on board. That sounds like a harsh statement, but on the other hand, that means that here in the United States, the majority of people believe in climate change now. That's different than it was, 6, 7 years ago. We've had a change. It has become more politicized, but now it's very well understood that the way to have people act on climate change is certainly the local actions for your own benefit, but also I do think we need to go beyond that. We can't just depend on if it affects you, then you'll act. If it doesn't affect you, then no reason to act, because that's not going to work either. So one of the reasons I'm here at Carlow, I mean, I'm at MIT, there isn't probably a more contrasting institution of higher education than MIT to Carlow, I think. I'm here because there has to be, brought along with the technology and the policy making and a lot of smart stuff to do, there also needs to be a really concerted effort on the morality of our place on this planet. What are we actually doing? Thankfully today, well, thankfully, that's kind of a strange way to say, but the evidence of our misbehavior is all around us now, and it is now affecting many, many more people. But again, like I said at the beginning, this notion of inclusion, of getting beyond being habituated to worst case scenario, there's a world of opportunity in that. Business opportunities. You've got a patent that's probably going to sell somewhat, and
It'll never make money, but
but still,
it might pay for itself.
But
maybe.
still, they're like they're opportunity, and to be an artist and to have this really extraordinary inflection point in history be part of what you're doing. That's an extraordinary opportunity. So I'm very much an optimist to suggest that we will meet the goal. And if we want to limit it to one goal, is net zero carbon emissions by 2050, getting down to 5 gigatons of carbon emissions emitted annually, and then we're taking 5 gigatons out of the atmosphere annually. We will get there. But how we get there is going to really require breakthroughs in how we think about our place in society. To answer your question, very, very quickly, to answer your question, it's got to be all of the above strategies to meet people where they are in their, for people who are really just getting by. Climate change is a non-issue. It should not be an issue. They need to consume more. One of the things that I say is that globally, most people on Earth need to consume more. 600 million Africans don't have reliable access to electricity. They actually need to they need to consume more electricity. And I think we have to think in terms of development, in terms of equitable and sustainable development, not just in terms of sustainability, in terms of limiting our resource consumption.
I don't want to get into politics, but when I think of a person who comes up with a thing, Make America Great Again, and who gets momentum, and people keep following and following and following, how do we do that type of thing to get people involved in this issue?
And I think that's a good transition, really, to think about, Susan, the work that you're doing, that you have gotten young people engaged in this really important work. I love the fact, that John is speaking to getting people involved. Can you kind of pick that up? Because I do think that's a part of it. The students who are in the audience, they are our future. They will take this work. 2050 sounds a long way away for a person like me, but it's a part of their reality for sure. And so I do think the point that how do we get more young people engaged in the conversation? And what's your experience, Susan, with the students that you work with who have been a part of literally moving a community from starvation to using water wells to be able to do more farming, be able to do their everyday lives?
Well, I think you really hit what I was thinking of when we were talking about this, is that when we think of climate change, it seems so big, right? It seems so complex, and it feels like we're so small, and that what are we going to do? But with my experience and the work that I've been doing, it's such a small detail that I have been overwhelmed with people's generosity to contribute to drilling the wells that we're doing, to building the clinics, for the students to really participate. And I think that you get people involved when they feel like they can make a difference, that their effort is actually going to be able to see change. And that's what I witness when I take students over to Uganda or Nicaragua or Jamaica or any of our service learning projects. They can see that their efforts really make an impact in improving that person's life. And then I think you're able to make that connection to the larger thing. But I think you have to see it right in real time, because it does seem overwhelming to think about what the world is going to be like in 2050. But we can make a difference today for these people, and I think that's when we get people involved.
So similar to environmental sustainability and healthcare, my life's a little easier in terms of getting people on board because we're very grassroots. We're going from, I've never heard of that, that's not possible. And it's easy to go to show somebody a video and say, well, blind tennis is possible. And it does affect you. So not being so kind of standoffish or this is somebody else's problem. in people's mentalities. So it's easy for people to see their role in it if you help them kind of walk down that pathway. Like, you could someday lose your vision. Everybody in here, whether you realize it or not, knows somebody with a severe visual impairment. And it's easy to imagine yourself, being affected by these things. It's easy to imagine yourself being affected by air pollution, by lack of potable water. So, it's the same strategy applied. Get people to start thinking in terms of the possible. Start weaving that into the messaging and start convincing people of that. For me, it's easy because nobody's heard of the sport. So straight off the bat, I can just tell you about the sport and that it exists and that it's possible. But yeah, it's the same approach with environmental sustainability. You have to help people to see that the solutions are real, they are possible, they are going to happen, and that we do have a role in it.
One thing that I could add is, it seems to me also that the academy, universities also need to be thinking about the shift in their mission. So the MIT was founded 2 days before the beginning of the Civil War. MIT as an institution has been maybe one of the most, if not the most powerful partner with industry to industrialize the United States and the world. Our mission should be now reindustrializing the United States for sustainability and for the things that we've been talking about. And that's a very, very different mission. A place like Carlow, I don't know Carlow nearly as well as you do, but it seems to me that an institution like this has a sort of central, pivotal role in catalyzing this discussion, continuing this discussion. I'm looking forward to getting online for future events and listening in. It's that kind of role that this institution can play in this region, because some things like the steel industry, decarbonizing the steel industry, that's a huge, major challenge to decarbonizing. That's a systems change, that's a technology change. Pittsburgh can benefit, but there's some technology breakthroughs that need to happen along with decarbonizing aviation and shipping. Yeah, battery guy.
I'm from the Allegheny Valley. We make stainless steel up there.
Yep.
Don was a professor of material science. He was part of the metals industry, and he was in the Allegheny Valley at Alcoa Tech Center. I went to Penn State, New Ken, just down the road. But that battery is the key to the future. If you're going to look at how electricity is made by steam, whether you do fossil fuel or whether you do nuclear, that's a chemical reactor that's making heat, an exothermic chemical reactor. It can make steam and continue to push steam generators without doing anything but off-the-shelf technology.
Yeah.
Why isn't it here?
Well, so...
And he has Boston Metals, which is carbon-free technology.
Yeah. So I'll try to be very brief.
And let me say one thing.
Yeah.
The battery, one of his students in the development was Ho-Jong Kim. He's a professor at Penn State, so the battery's already here at Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
It just needs to be manufactured here. Yeah. And that could be made adapted and put into houses at the cost of a new furnace and generate your own electricity like they're selling solar, and then the excess can be put out into the grid, which immediate grid would be the municipalities that these houses are in, because they consume electricity too. And think of it as a reverse grid system rather than the centralized and broadcast out. And that needs to be done here in Pittsburgh. And it's already available and it's off the shelf.
Well, I hope that it happens. I don't know the details on why it's not exactly happening, but if you don't mind, I'm going to generalize this and sort of make it more accessible to everybody. And that is that, absolutely agree with you. This is extraordinary technology. The solution for the future is multiple solutions. So it's not going to be one battery. It's going to be multiple battery technologies for grid scale power storage. That's what's really needed, because renewable energy is intermittent, and we know that. But like you say, there are technologies that have been developed. The broader topic I want to actually sort of generalize is that the conversations that I'm involved in all the time have this kind of bimodal aspect when we're talking about sustainability. There's a first phase, which is now, and it's generally to 2030. We know how to do things. We have technologies. They just need to be supported. Sometimes the government has to step in. Things like circular economy strategies, the government has to catalyze those. That's the first phase, because we need to do that to reduce emissions by 2030 as aggressively as possible, including capping oil wells for methane leakage and all that sort of stuff, right? We know what those things are, and that's going to buy us time for the breakthroughs that we know we will need between 2030 and 2050, because we're not going to get to net zero without a couple of breakthroughs. And the reason I think this is what I wanted to bring up is that all of the work that everyone is doing, I think, is really addressing the needs today with an eye towards, okay, to really get to a sustainable society in 2050 through this grand transition, boy, there's going to have to be tremendous changes and huge, but the seeds of those paradigm shifts are there, I think, in all of the work that you see tonight.
John, you said that we're going to do it. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
How do you know?
Well, one.
You told me to give you a hard
Yeah. No,
Okay.
absolutely. So absolutely. So a few things. So I run a group called the Urban Metabolism Group at MIT, and essentially what we have studied is the resource requirements of cities. So you draw a system boundary around the city and you figure out what needs to come in to run the urban economy: water, materials, food, energy, and the rest of it. How those resources transformed within the city's center, and then what are the products? Dispersed pollutants and organized product, like, the actual products that the city makes. That is a study to be able to establish what's the resource intensity of the most complex thing that humans make, cities. I'm really optimistic about the future, because just 10 years ago, we didn't have a number on the resource intensity of cities. We had no idea how material intensive, energy intensive. There was some research done, but there's been an enormous amount of learnings in the past 10 years. So we know more about the planet and about our effect on the planet today than we did yesterday. We'll know more tomorrow than we do today. I mean, it's just, the increase in knowledge is extraordinary, which just leads me to believe that the usual thing that we do as a species is we underestimate the acceleration of technologies to solve the problems that we feel are intractable, right? We've always done that, right? And so I do see that fusion, I'm sure many of you have been following, there have been some extraordinary breakthroughs in the physics of fusion. Almost now every 6 months there's a new announcement on fusion. Fusion is free energy forever without any waste product. That's an amazing thing. And if we do have a quantum computer that works, that's a 20 orders of magnitude more efficient computation than the most powerful computer today, which, talk about energy efficiency. I mean, that's going to be a game changer. So there are just those two things would get us a long way to net zero. And those are just two things of, as a gentleman mentioned, 30 technologies that are being developed now. And so maybe my view is also a bit colored because I work with extraordinary students who see that the prospect for their unicorn is in climate tech, right? And, I'm thrilled to see that happen. That ambition to be, master of the universe is actually going to lead to a sustainable world. That's an extraordinarily optimistic thing to see. That makes me optimistic. I'll leave it at that.
Aaron, what do you think is going to stop us?
Ooh, yeah, I feel like I range from optimistic to pessimistic, but I don't think pessimism helps. And I guess from my perspective, I mean, okay, I'm going to talk about what I'm optimistic about. And I think, like, when I made the short film following multiple community members, I think that there's, like, so much transformation in terms of bettering people's lives have come from grassroots situations. Like, U.S. Steel would have never changed anything if it were up to them. It's sort of always profit over people. So I think, like, whether that's labor or whether that's environmental activism, comes from community members. And that is a lot of work and hard work, and on the most vulnerable people. The people who are affected are usually the people leading the charge. And so making this film, and like I have been very inspired by just the energy that comes from the community and really like the vast amount of transformation that people have been able to make. Again, like, but I think what makes me, what is scary is like the power differential, and that power differential seems to be getting like more and more and more and more in terms of resources, wealth, power. That's what's scary to me.
Sorry, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Bear with me as I try to word this properly, but clearly we're talking a lot about sustainability and new technologies and everything that we can use to kind of help people improve in, various different ways. So I guess my question, and this is for anyone, would be how can we ensure that the accessibility of different technologies and innovations remains like the primary goal, and that doesn't get compromised by the need for economic gain and financial gain? How can we ensure that these technologies are actually accessible to the people that actually need them?
What do you think?
We'll let you chair the committee to make sure that people, yeah. It can be a tough sell. You know, you've got to get individuals convinced that technologies should be in the right hands of the people who need them. You've got to convince funding agencies, or individual donors, funding agencies, grant people. It helps if you convince the government to allocate resource to areas of need. So, you know, you have to use a lot of different strategies. And you have to get with people who have expertise in strategies that work to get the resources into the right hand. Nothing that any of us do up here is simple. And getting the right diverse group onto your team and consulting with you, whether that's how to get a good grant or how to solve the logistics issues of getting a device into the right person's hand. It's tough. That's not an easy question that you asked. But if you could go to your communications class and learn to be a really good communicator so that you can convince other people of your cause, then you can get the right people at the table and to make the things happen.
So can I? So I've got a different take on that, and that is that, one, I think we have to acknowledge that there are entities that are working very, very hard against any climate actions, right? Countries and companies. They're fully invested in not decarbonizing and completely disinterested in any kind of equitable, framework for the future. Companies are, I guess we're being recorded, but companies are amoral. They have no moral mission, despite their marketing departments. They're profit machines, right? Fully acknowledge. I'm perfectly happy for them to be that. We just have to acknowledge that they are that. And in every major environmental issue that we've had, companies have disavowed, denied, pushed back furiously until they absolutely can't anymore, and then they get sued like crazy, and then they go back to denying, and it's just so that I think we just have to be very, very clear that that's the game, and so therefore government has a role, and if government doesn't have a role, then we really have an issue. Now, one thing I wanted to say very quickly on the subnational actor role. So subnational actor is a term meaning those things below or smaller than the federal government or the national context. That includes cities and corporations. Cities have been extraordinarily successful at actually moving forward, shifting the needle on climate change, electrifying buildings, electrifying transportation, and that's a really interesting and fantastic pathway towards sustainability, because cities have a different agency than federal, and they're not beholden in the same way that the federal government, Congress, and national politicians are. But I think we just have to be very, very realistic and clear-eyed about the situation. This is not trying to convince people to do the right thing. This is, people are going to absolutely oppose what decarbonization entails, especially equitable decarbonization. And just to round this out and to really, put my foot in my mouth, Russia, Saudi Arabia, really the Qatar and the oil producing states, and many states in the United States, because the United States is now the largest oil and methane producer. I don't use the phrase natural gas, methane producer. Those countries are opposed to, those regions and countries are opposed to meaningful climate actions. So I think we have to be very, just very clear that this is, part of this is a real battle. It's a real war, and it's oppositional.
I'd like to connect this to, in my area, in special education, because it's a really wonderful example of how we have seen improvement in the last 50 years. So in the 1960s, when I was in elementary school, we didn't have children with disabilities in my school. They weren't allowed to come to my school. And so it was grassroots movement through parents and communities that prompted laws to be changed in our government in 1975, and we have seen that the education system has opened itself up and invited everybody in. So that's an example of how that happened. And then in 2005, the UN passed the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, and that has been signed by 174 countries that have recognized that this is, people of all ability status are valued. And so I think that's an example of how we have improved. We've come from one star in a very short time when you think about it, just 50 years. But I think that it all started with a bunch of people getting together and putting their heads together like the committee that Jen was talking about and saying, you know what, this is wrong, we want to do something about it.
I was speaking with an alum just the other day, and she said, the one thing that Carlow did, she was a 1964 alum, she said, the one thing Carlow did for me was it required me to use my voice. Mm-hmm. And I would respond to that question by saying that we all must be committed to using our voice. And it doesn't matter how old or how young you are, you have a voice. And education is not simply about, you getting something for you. Education is really about you really learning how to use your voice for the purposes of making our world better. We talk here all the time about the importance of, to whom much is given, much is required. Mm-hmm. And we who have the privilege of sitting in academe have been given much. And so I hope that every person in here, especially our students, will be committed to using your voice, because this is truly a living out our mission of creating a more just world. And sometimes it's that simple, being willing to use your voice for what you know is right and not standing in the shadow hoping that somebody else speaks up. This has been a great conversation, and I am really thrilled to have been a part of it. Is there any closing remarks that any of you would like to ask their question? Sure.
Hi, my name is Anthony Johnson. I'm a person that wears many hats. I was trained by the legendary speaker, Les Brown. This is what I do. I am a motivational speaker. I help people. I am also an inventor. I am also a researcher. I am also a man with those hats that exposes all of the stupid things going on in the world to make everything better. Now, just to let you know, I work with IBM. I work with Tesla, Elon Musk. I also work with Panasonic. I work with them, and I also work with the United States government. I work with these organizations to make a change in the world. I develop technologies. I have over 55 patent technologies that can change the world, where you have this climate change and all of this different problems going on with gun violence and everything. I have all the technologies to stop all of this stuff. I would like it to be here today. I would like it to be here tomorrow. However, I know it's a process to get everything established, get everything up to great, get everything exposed to everyone, so everyone would have access to these technologies. Now, solutions is the best made. We have the solutions to get these things done. God puts us in various different places where we're supposed to be. This is one of the places that I'm supposed to be at this time and at this moment. The organization that I have is SOS STSE. It's called SOST. This organization right here is an organization that's going to change the world. These technologies is going to bring a whole new light of adventure for everyone.
So thank you so much for sharing that information with us, because it's going to take all of us to make that difference. I think we have 2 more questions, and then we're going to end the night. Yes.
So I'm a psychology student here at Carlow, so I'm particularly interested in the social psychology of sustainability. So my question is, Dr. Fernandez mentioned habituation of climate change, and how can we make these acceptance behaviors more widely observable and known to people who it wouldn't otherwise be obvious to?
Okay, so I'll answer your question by giving an example of work that we're doing with the music industry. So the prevailing understanding of why people act on climate change or not is, the research says that there are essentially 2 mechanisms by which somebody ascribes to climate change or not. One is they're either part of a tribe, they're part of a group, and their group, Democrats or Republicans, are interested in climate change or not, right? The second is that the person may have a preferred messenger or a very trusted person. It could be their doctor, it could be their priest, it could be Leonardo DiCaprio, who, by the way, is the most trusted voice in climate change today, globally. We thought, we started a project because we thought that's not enough. That's not enough, because that's not really, it's difficult to change those things. It's difficult to change a person's tribe. It's difficult to necessarily build that trust with a trusted messenger. So we thought there would be a third way, and it's really cultural production. So we started working with the music industry, because the music industry is essentially if you've been to a concert or a music festival, is essentially trying to create temporarily another world, right? You're in this experience, an immersive experience, and generally speaking, it's a world that people want that doesn't exist. It's something else. And music festivals are particularly powerful in that way to create that. So we've actually done a number of things. We have these VR tools that we take to music festivals. Of course, my undergraduates love this research project. They love going. But we've also just recently signed a project with Warner Music, Live Nation, and Coldplay to assess the carbon intensity of live music. And part of this is to enlist artists who are understandably risk averse as messengers of climate. No one else on the planet can get 96,000 people into a stadium 3 nights in a row, but Taylor Swift, right? And so, you know, the ability to use that platform, leverage that platform in the way that the artist can, because they have a brand, they have a, you know, they can't compromise their art. And this is where the alignment with cultural production is super important. And it's getting to be easier and easier to align. And so we think there's a third way. And that third way is, let's imagine a new world. Let's have some immersive experiences about, you know, a little taste of this new world, and then leave you with that feeling so that in your daily lives, you actually do change your behavior. I hope that answered your question.
That's good. And there's one last question.
Good evening. I want to thank Carlow University for having this, making this investment to present this awesome venue, share this very important information. My name is Kent Bay. I'm a Hill District resident, 3 generations, U.S. military veteran, 3rd generation, beginning with my grandfather, served in the U.S. Navy. Ironically, I would eventually join the U.S. Navy with no grooming, just my own personal decision as a teenager, graduating from Taylor Alderdice High School, just wanting to serve in the military on my own. I'm hearing a lot of words, a lot of very interesting things being said today. The gentleman that spoke well before me had some very fascinating things on the table there that deserves a lot more attention. And a couple of the students here, very brilliant, had some very important things that they put out on the floor that also deserves more attention. I formed a nonprofit organization, Project Love Coalition, that advocates on behalf of veterans and their families in the areas of housing, workforce development, and community building. We currently operate an urban farm in the Hill District neighborhood, where we place a lot of focus on climate-smart agriculture and inviting just about anyone to the space to learn about agriculture and to share some of the amazing things that they would like to share with members of the community. We also have a building development project currently on the table where we're looking to bring more people into this and have some more input. I was just fascinated with so much of this talk around sustainable solutions, sustainable development. I think we're at a point in the things that we're doing that, with all these words being thrown around, and there's not enough opportunity to see, well, what do they actually look like in real time? Is it possible to have some of these amazing people join us on this journey in climate-smart agriculture at our site in the Hill District, the Peace and Friendship Farm, and also join us in our building development project where we're building housing for homeless veterans. Very disgraceful thing, but it's a very real thing here in Pittsburgh, and a lot of our veterans are not treated with the dignity that they should, that they deserve. There's definitely a track record here of not treating our veterans well. But we are underway with a building development project that's going to provide housing to homeless veterans. And honestly, this would be our first step in that direction. And I want to open the door for so many people that would like to join us in making all these words that we're hearing into a reality through the things that we have going on in the community. So if there's anyone that has anything that they can assist us with, everyone is welcome. So thank you so much. And
Thank
if you
you.
can give us some feedback on that, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So our time has come to a close. I have appreciated every statement and every question that has been made, and it is wonderful to be here with the Carlow community, with our neighborhood community, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. And this is something that affects every single lives. Will you help me thank our panel for being with us today? Great job. And then would you help me thank our team that worked so hard to pull all this out and get that information to you and to coordinate it, both our marketing and communications team. Would you help me thank them as well? As I mentioned earlier, we, all of us, can be that pebble that causes that ripple, that causes the change to occur. I hope you've enjoyed our first session of the speaker series, the Impact Speaker Series. On April 15th from 5:30 to 7 p.m., we will hear from Kashmir Hill, a New York Times reporter and the author of Your Face Belongs to Us. She will discuss how we can work to avoid the misuse of AI in facial recognition. So I invite you back for another conversation. This is a session that will be sponsored by our Atkins Center for Ethics, and we hope you will come back and join in that thought-provoking discussion as well. Thank you again for being with us tonight. I hope indeed that your commitment to the issue has grown, that your awareness has grown, and that you understand that because we are in this together, that we can indeed get to the other side of this in a successful way that indeed makes a pathway for future generations to live in a great world. Thank you again for coming tonight. God bless all of you.